What's up, everybody? I am Pastor Jeff Durbin. You're watching another episode of Collision right here on Apologia Studios. Today, we're talking about actually one of my favorite subjects to talk about, UFOs and UAPs, and we're doing that by way of engaging a bit with Dr. Stephen Greer. You may know him as the guy that's done all the UFO documentaries like Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, and he was recently on the Sean Ryan Show talking about disclosure, UFOs, UAPs, so let's get to it. All right, so this subject, I cannot stress enough just how important it is for us to be able to engage this as Christians in a meaningful way, in a biblical way, and also in a way that doesn't close our eyes to what's being presented to us. And so in the past, Christians would sort of just simply say, and they're right about it, the bulk of these experiences and these sightings and these things demonic in origin and all of that. We would rightly say that because that's the truth. But what we're dealing with today is something very different. We're dealing with today actual footage, radar data, congressional hearings, disclosure, whistleblowers, and all those sorts of things. As a matter of fact, when I'm recording this, right before Congress a couple of hours ago was a congressional hearing with three people, whistleblowers, people who have seen these tic-tac objects and those sorts of things, interacted with them. And so we have to engage with this as Christians in a meaningful way, but we're actually going to do it today by way of engaging a little bit with what Stephen Greer says in an interview regarding contact, non-locality, essentially seances and transcendental meditation to communicate with these extraterrestrial beings. But before we do that, I wanted to just give you guys an example of why this is so important to do as Christians because of what's right in front of us. So this right here is actual footage released by the Pentagon. It's a UFO footage from pilots, military pilots.
Dude, this is on, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating. Nickel 6-1 Tango Apologia, over. Oh, got it! Woohoo! Roger.
So more and more of this is coming out, and it's becoming rather mainstream in terms of whistleblowers, eyewitness testimony, video footage of objects that seem to defy the laws of physics, that seem to defy what we know today about material science. And with that, we have to be able to engage on a level that's a little more meaningful than just simply waving the hand and saying demons. We need to be able to have an explanation for this from the Christian worldview and actually explain, here's the point of contact with what they're doing now, like with Stephen Greer trying to communicate with extraterrestrials and even celestial beings, he says. And so again, starting this to get into Stephen Greer, I wanted to show you another clip again of what just took place today before Congress, a hearing on UFOs, government transparency, and here's a clip of the commander of the Navy pilot commander. This is Commander Fravor, who has the famous testimony of interacting with a tic-tac object that defies the laws of physics. And here is his testimony today. It's rather lengthy, but before we get to Greer, I want you to see why it's so important to hear what Greer is saying in terms of the launching point that gets into the occult. Here is from today's hearing.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressmen, Congresswomen. I want to first thank you for the invitation to speak to the committee on the UAP topic that has been in the news for the past 6 years and seems to be continuing to gain momentum. As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All 4 of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down and saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cat point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar. And I can get into modes later if you're interested.
So just a sampling of this conversation that is current. Again, it just took place today before a congressional hearing. Commander Fravor, a really skilled military pilot, a Navy pilot, very well respected, and this happened. There's footage of this, there's radar data and all the rest. You have him as a fighter pilot interacting with an object in time and space that seems to defy the laws of physics and the things that we understand today and what material science can even do. A tic-tac object that is dropping from space down to 20,000 feet, stopping, staying for hours, and then disappearing again. A tic-tac object that is interacting with them, moving with them, knows what they're doing and is moving in accordance with it. A tic-tac object that is jamming their radar. A tic-tac object that disappears in an instant and ends up like some 60 miles away in less than a minute. And so this isn't the only testimony of this sort of thing and the only footage. More and more is coming out all the time. So with that, does the Christian worldview have an answer for this? Absolutely it does. And more development of explaining this phenomenon, of course, needs to occur in a comprehensive way from us as Christians. However, I want to show you a point of contact that's very important by way of Stephen Greer. If you are unfamiliar with Dr. Stephen Greer, he is very well known in this field of UFOs, UAPs, extraterrestrial contact. He has a documentary that's called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. It's on Amazon. I believe you can watch it on YouTube as well. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. I highly encourage everybody who is interested in this discussion right now to watch Stephen Greer's film, and here's why. That film opens up, and it's actually very interesting. It opens up seemingly very observational science. It opens up very footage, and there's this thing and that thing, and you can take a look at these things, and it seems very rigorous and intellectual, and okay, let's see where this is going, and we need to be able to have answers for this. And then on a dime, it switches. It switches then to the rest of the documentary, Dr. Stephen Greer explaining how to now make contact with these beings from other star systems, he claims, these interdimensional beings, and he even says celestial beings in some other interviews. But Dr. Stephen Greer then takes the time in Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind to explain that the way we need to do this is through non-locality. This is a typical New Age Era 3 type conversation. It is very popular in terms of non-locality, remote viewing, transcendental meditation, seances, meditation, all that stuff. It's stuff that's as old as the hills when it comes to the occult, and Stephen Greer wants to teach you to basically do this, to make contact with these beings. And so there's an interesting interview. I wanted to play this clip for you guys to interact with it from the Christian perspective. This is Dr. Stephen Greer talking about having contact with these other beings.
Are higher dimensional beings trying to speak with us right now?
Well, I mean, first of all, because I'm very specific. I'm a doctor, so we use very specific language for clarity. What we're doing are involving a specific project, a diplomatic project, using advanced concepts in higher consciousness to communicate with extraterrestrial biological entities from other star systems. There are beings from higher dimensions, celestial, angelic, what have you, which also assists with that at times, but that's very different from an ET civilization that is flesh and blood, 3D, to transverse other dimensions to go from point A to B. So one of the problems with this subject, I wrote a paper in 1995 called ETs and the New Cosmology, and it's the conflation of all things people don't understand, calling them the same thing. So like all things, it's important to be specific. So what we're doing with what's called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, and I think some of your viewers may have seen the documentary. You can see it free now on Amazon Prime and Tubi and Hulu and Pluto or wherever, is training people to make contact with these civilizations. And we're using consciousness and higher consciousness because these civilizations have technologies that interface with coherent thought. Now, in the process of doing that, often we will have interactions with beings from other higher dimensions that are not extraterrestrial. But there needs to be an understanding of what we're specifically doing. And this is a global diplomatic initiative between humans and these very advanced civilizations from other star systems. So it is not a project that is aimed at primarily contacting intelligent beings from other higher dimensions, such as celestial, but that happens as a consequence naturally because the universe is an integrated quantum hologram that's conscious.
And there you go. That is what I wanted to introduce you to. And of course, in this episode of Collision, you'll note that I'm giving you much longer clips, and I'm letting them talk for a much longer period of time because I want you actually to get a full picture, as much as is possible right now as you're being introduced to this, as to what these people believe and what their worldview ultimately is. So it's interesting. Dr. Stephen Greer, he is one of the leading spokespeople for the modern UFO or UAP phenomenon and explaining and contacting are being contacted by whistleblowers who have information about downed craft, supposedly, or they claim extraterrestrial beings and those sorts of things, government projects. Dr. Stephen Greer is one of the top people in this field. And so if you're studying this at all, you're going to make a connection with Dr. Stephen Greer. But it's interesting, the reason I've chosen Greer is because Greer seems to be, to my mind, in this current climate we're in and what we have to deal with, he seems to have the most honesty in terms of, or at least his ability to articulate his presuppositional commitments and his worldview as he approaches the discussion about UAPs or UFOs. Those terms are used interchangeably today. Unidentified aerial phenomenon versus unidentified flying objects. He has the ability to articulate his worldview. So you'll hear him here saying, things like quantum hologram that's conscious. You hear him talking about the oneness of the universe. You hear him talking about things like non-locality and, remote viewing and transcendental meditation, Era 3 stuff. Dr. Stephen Greer is essentially articulating the normative language and definitions and worldview of the committed New Ager and the person who's committed to witchcraft, the occult, divination, and all the rest. And so what you'll see is we have this very strange phenomenon. We've got lights in the sky, things that defy what we understand about physics and those sorts of things. And so then the answer from Greer is, well, we need to be able to communicate with these beings through meditation and contact. And what he's essentially describing is something that is condemned in Scripture, something that is as old as the hills. It's something that humanity has been involved in as long as recorded time. People trying to make contact with the dead at times, or higher celestial beings, angels, demons, those sorts of things. I mean, you could look at the average New Ager that's sort of blind to what they're going to experience. They think they're talking to nice, healthy, kind, angelic beings. They think they're talking to sort of dead relatives, ghosts and spirits and those sorts of things. That person may be just sort of ignorant of what they're making contact with, but they do make contact. Absolutely, they do. Many of them do, and regularly. And oftentimes those contacts turn nefarious in many people's experiences. But you also have the other realm of sort of like the dark spiritual arts in witchcraft, whether it's Satanism, Luciferianism, those, in that realm of like dark witchcraft where people know what they're engaging with and they like it. And they contact demons knowingly. They're knowingly speaking to demons. And so you've got, people on different spectrums in terms of when they try to make contact with the other side, why they're doing it, what they think they're doing, all of that. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Pastor Jeff Durbin. Thank you for watching Collision. We wanted to provide a solid resource to help you to respond to anything coming into collision with the Christian worldview. There's more as a response to this video and others at Apologia's All Access at apologiastudios.com. When you partner with Apologia Studios, you make all of our content possible, and we give you all kinds of amazing other content to help equip you and to train you and your friends and families in the Christian faith. And so go to apologiastudios.com, sign up for All Access, and get more from Collision.